Well, speaking of carrying, you've had to carry a lot of your colleagues over the years since you got into the TV world. Would love to get into some stories. I mean, you worked with the great David Feherty, Gary McCord, Frank Nobilo. I mean, you're alongside Jim Nantz every single week. Can you share a few stories about some of those guys with us?
Yeah, well, I think most of the stories everyone's heard about Feherty, because Feherty stories are always the best. But I think the best one was when he was on his way over to from the lodge to meet a couple of friends, I won't mention their names, at one of the restaurants over at the other hotel over there at Spanish Bay. And while he was coming down through the forest, he ran into a deer. And he didn't know what to do. And, David was all, frenetic and running around it, didn't know what he was going to do. And he decided that he'd, shove the deer off the road. Well, the deer was still alive, barely. So he grabbed one of his guns, he always carries a few, out of the car and shot it. Was the nicest thing to do. And then he tried to put the deer over the fence. Well, as he was trying to get the deer over the fence and off the road and out of the way, it sort of leaked all over him. And when he arrived at the restaurant, the guys in Colt, I know you've heard this story, so you know who I'm talking about, was there. They said, "Wow, David, you smell like deer piss." And he said, "It's a long story." But that was probably something that you may have to cut from the show if you're going to tape this and send it out. But that was one of the funniest things that we were there that week. I wasn't in the car with him, but I can just imagine David in that situation. David finds himself in more unusual situations than on Earth. And, the times that he would be at Augusta when he would be doing the late night show, and for the last decade or so, I've done the late night show Thursday and Friday nights. And David would come over and just have so much fun. The crew loved working with him. He would, drive across the par 3 course to get to the Butler cabin from our old compound. He just did so many crazy and outrageous things that it's a wonder he wasn't sort of put in jail every week with some of the outrageous stuff he got up to. But one of the greatest human beings and one of the greatest guys to spend time with, for sure.
He was special. There's no doubt. I mean, he's for golf, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of personalities, but he was the first, out there personality. Then you put him with McCord, and I mean, they were beautiful together. Yeah,
because, the juxtapositions in the storylines and the way they told them. And David, like you, Colt, he always has a quick comeback. He doesn't need to say much. I'll always try and explain myself, whereas you guys are so quick and so sharp. David would conjure up an image in his mind, and he would figure out the best way to portray that image on air in as few words as possible. And then McCord would just wind him up.
McCord's the reverse. What's the most words I can use?
Yeah, exactly. And most of them were superfluous, but he was very good at it. He would often say to David, and he knew David had no opportunity of getting anywhere near the green. And he'd say, "David, so what's that putt going to do? What's he got down there?" And then eventually he got so sick of McCord doing that to him that he'd say, "Well, listen here, you've been sitting there all day. You know the green. Why don't you tell me what this putt's going to do?" And Colt, you're out there on the ground with the players and having a great time, and they all love you being there with them. But sometimes it's hard to get close to read a putt. And sometimes you're getting thrown under the bus when guys like me or McCord say, "Hey, Colt, what's the line of that putt?"
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's the story? I think it was Quail Hollow. You probably heard this one, Finchy, but McCord's calling it. Feherty's walking with the group, and they see Feherty after the shot's being played. He calls it, and then he scoots over. He's got to go to the bathroom or something like that. And McCord sees that, and he's like, "Oh, okay. So as soon as they send it to me, I'm going to ask Feherty, what's this putt look like?" And he's like, "I know his pants are down inside the porta potty and all this stuff." So they send it down to him. And he's like, "Hey, yeah, David, you're down there on 16. What's he got here?" And he said something, and this won't be verbatim, but he's like, "Oh, this is a stinky one here, McCord," or something, because he knew that he was in the shitter at the time. And it's just stuff like that. That was probably the golden era, I would say, of kind of personalities at the time.
It really was. Another quick one similar to that with Feherty was he and Kostis were on the ground at the PGA Championship, and the truck went down. So maybe the generator ran out of fuel or whatever happened. Someone pulled a wire, but sometimes it happens that the whole tower goes down. And I've been in a situation where one of the guys in the tower will get it on a streaming feed or whatever and bring it over, or they'll just run a sound through from the truck so we know what's going on because we have no visual. Well, anyway, that had happened, and they threw it down to Peter Kostis and David Feherty. And Kostis picks it up, and Lance Barrow's in his ear, and he's saying, "Oh, Kostis, you guys pick it up. We lost the truck. So Kostis picks it up, and he says, "Well, here we are at the 13th with Shigeki Maruyama." I find it so hard to say, by the way. I always say Maruyama. I say marijuana. But anyway, he said, "Here we're with Shigeki Maruyama, and he's got a 3-wood. David, what's he got down there?" And David said, "It's a long way to go, Peter. I'm not too sure whether he's going to make it." And we hear this whoosh, and he hits it. And Peter says, "Well, how was it?" And he said, "Man, he really smoked that one." So he had in his mind, the marijuana.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was just it was a moment where David always had the quickest, funniest, wittiest thing to say, right? Here's marijuana, and he really smoked that one or something. But it was so many fun times with David. I've been at CBS now for 18 years, and McCord and Kostis left at the end of 19, so 4 years without them. David, I think about 4 or 5 years before that. But Dottie came in to replace David, and she's been great. She's one of the most popular announcers on television. I think one of the best walkers ever. We just have a really, really great team. Very, very fond of everyone there. But I just think in general, the times we used to have, Colt, and you were probably born 20 years too late. You would have had a great time in the 70s and 80s with the guys, and what we used to get up to on tour, compared to now, where the guys are in the gym and not drinking, and it's kind of boring. And I think TV is a little that way as well now, that there's so much you can't say and so many things you have to adhere to. And you just see the difference with you guys on a podcast in comparison to us on a broadcast. It's two totally different products. And I think the younger audience want it to be more like a podcast and a little bit more out there. But network television, you've got to toe the line, and it's just a little more different, a little more structured, if you will.